In just a moment, we're going to hear some words of Torah from Jeffrey Greenbaum, and I just want to acknowledge how much both Jeff and Eileen have done for Israel since the war began, always, but especially since October 7th. Many of you know that Eileen just got back from an amazing quick trip to Israel with her granddaughter, where I know she did so much, and Jeff and Eileen have been collecting packages since October 7th to ship to Israel for soldiers who desperately need supplies, and you've just both done such remarkable work. So kol hakavod, yasher koach, for all you do for our congregation, but for the Jewish people, broadly speaking. And we can't wait to hear your words, Jeff. So without further ado, Jeffrey Greenbaum.
Shabbat Shalom, and thank you, Rabbi. In case you don't realize it, I'm not the Israeli soldier you all came to hear. That's next. I volunteered to deliver this Devar Torah at Scotch in the Sukkah on Wednesday night, October 4, in a different world. Give or take an hour or so, this is the exact moment 8 weeks ago when our lives dramatically changed, possibly forever. War is again raging in Israel against the Hamas butchers. Anti-Semitism is no longer hidden. Last year, I spoke about several troubling anti-Semitic incidents, but now there has been a 400% increase in those incidents. Even worse, in London, the incidents have increased 1,350%. Just think about those numbers. Just this past Wednesday, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, the highest-ranking Jewish official ever elected in the United States, decried anti-Semitism in a major 40-minute address in the Senate. He said, quote, "The rise of anti-Semitism is a crisis, a five-alarm fire that must be extinguished." He further said that the vitriol against Israel and Jews in the United States has crossed into widespread anti-Semitism, the likes of which we've never seen for generations in this country, if ever. The outbreak of anti-Semitism on our college campuses is particularly extreme, where their so-called elite college is failing us with a loss of moral values and a simple failure to teach the difference between right and wrong. 3 Ivy League students from Yale, Cornell, and Brown recently wrote in the New York Times, quote, "A hostile environment that began with statements from pro-Palestinian student organizations justifying terrorism has now rapidly spiraled into death threats and physical attacks, leaving Jewish students alarmed and vulnerable." Think about what our kids are going through on our campuses. Also this week, a lawsuit was filed against the University of California, Berkeley School of Law for having fostered a long-standing, unchecked spread of anti-Semitism that has led to harassment and violence against Jews on campus. A synagogue president, Samantha Wall, was murdered in Detroit, although it's unclear whether this was related to anti-Semitism. In my wildest dreams, I never thought that accepting the position of temple president years ago would have impacted my personal safety. And I'm happy I don't see Marla here because I wouldn't want her to be concerned. And if you think our daily lives in Livingston here have not changed, drive by my house at 5 p.m. any day and see the 20 Amazon cartons on my front step with supplies going to help the Israeli soldiers, thanks to the generosity of many in this congregation, the broader community, and even beyond, Jew and non-Jew. Look to the security we now need in the back of this room simply to conduct our weekly services. Look to the streets in New York, Newark, and major cities around the world that have been closed due to protests celebrating the Hamas murders. Even both the Thanksgiving Day parade and the Rockefeller tree lighting were disrupted by Palestinian protesters. Look to how many of you have taken time from your daily jobs to travel to Washington to show our solidarity and support of Israel, to be with 300,000 Jews, 2% of all the Jews in the world, including 43 from TBS and a delegation led by our own Rabbi Cohen, and even those who traveled on missions to Israel, as was done by Rabbi Cohn, Steve Montag, Eileen Greenbaum. Mickey Fine is about to go. Her plane was canceled as the war started. Hopefully she'll get out tonight, and many others. But through all this turmoil, we look to this morning's Torah portion, which speaks to us, and it cries out to me in a way that it has never done before. That's what I love about our Torah. We all know the basic story. It's the story of Jacob's great confrontation with his brother Esau. Jacob is about to leave Uncle Laban's home in Iran, where he has stayed for 20 years, to return to his native land of Canaan, the land God gave to him. He learned that Esau is coming to meet him with 400 men. He is greatly frightened. He fears that Esau will destroy not only him, but also the mothers and children alike. Sound familiar? He makes careful preparations. He divides his people and livestock into two groups, putting his beloved family to the rear and the most beloved furthest back. He then decides he was going to try to influence his brother's conduct with gifts. As the Torah says, he set aside as these gifts 200 she-goats and 20 he-goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 20 milch camels and their colts, 40 cows and 10 bulls, 20 she-asses and 10 he-asses. He reasons, if I propitiate him with presents in advance and then face him, perhaps he will show me favor. That night, he struggles with an angel and prevails against all odds. While he is injured with a dislocated hip, and he's given a new name, the name of Israel, indicating that he's to be the father of a new nation. As it is said, he has striven with beings divine and human and has prevailed. Meanwhile, the next day his plan works. Esau embraces him and they both weep. Esau, thinking Jacob is coming to greet him in Seir, offers to travel with him and his whole entourage. Jacob, however, recognizes that Esau is not his friend. Whether he was kissed or bit, he knows the real truth. He wisely begs off, and each go their own way. Jacob, or Israel, goes on to become a great nation. There are three parts to this story that I find particularly meaningful at this time. First, we saw that Jacob used his wealth to try to influence conduct through gifts. We have great turmoil on our college campuses. Some university presidents refuse to speak out to condemn the atrocities of Hamas. Others permit hate speech that advocates violence against Jews from student organizations, like the Students for Justice in Palestine, whose National Steering Committee not only supports Hamas, but calls for the violent elimination of Israel and the Jewish people, right on our college campuses. But they also permit it from college professors, whose hateful rhetoric goes unpunished under the false guise of free speech. But certain prominent Jews had heeded Jacob's lesson. Just as the providing of gifts can potentially change conduct, so too can the withholding of gifts. At my alma mater, the University of Pennsylvania, Mark Rowan, the head of the Global Apollo Hedge Fund and chair of the Wharton Board of Overseers, who in 2018 contributed $50 million to Penn, announced he was no longer donating to Penn. So did Ronald Lauder, the head of the World Jewish Congress and the heir to the cosmetic fortune. And so did John Huntsman, a non-Jew, the former governor of the state of Utah, who funded the main Wharton building on campus known as Huntsman Hall. The same thing also happened at other Ivy institutions. Leslie Wexner, the founder of the Limited Brands, withdrew his financial support from Harvard. Others did as well. Prominent board members resigned from the Board of Trustees of Penn and Columbia. These efforts have had some success. At Penn, the president issued a strong statement condemning the Hamas atrocities, and she had the board adopt a strong policy against anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, and appointed separate task force to implement both. But more needs to be done on our campuses to ensure the safety of Jewish students. Small donors can also have an impact. I learned that at Harvard, after 30 student organizations issued a statement saying that the Hamas murder of 1,400 Jews was the sole fault of the Jews, right on that campus. 1,600 Jewish alumni formed the Harvard Jewish Alumni Association and have threatened to withhold donations unless the university does more to combat anti-Semitism. I also learned that 45% of Harvard's revenue comes from charitable giving. And if you think your small contribution does not make a difference, in 2022, 95% of all donations to universities were gifts of less than $5,000. But even before I knew those facts, I felt compelled to write to the president of Penn, Liz McGill, to withdraw my financial support. Why I've never given $50 million, and I don't have the wealth to even give 200 she-goats and 20 he-goats. I have supported the university consistently for over the past 50 years. I told President McGill in my letter that the university I have known has always had a sizable Jewish population, was a place where Jewish students could feel safe and flourish, where Jewish fraternities, such as my own AEPI, could function with open doors in the center of campus without the need for security or fear of anti-Semitic graffiti, like that was recently placed on the front door of AEPI. It was a place where Jewish campus institutions like Hillel had enough Jews to regularly conduct services. But that is no more. As I wrote, it has become clear that the admissions office has consciously decided to reduce the number of Jewish students admitted, particularly from the Northeast. And the word was out that Penn is not a school to which the most highly qualified Jews from New Jersey should apply. Why is this? Because most likely they're not getting in. And those who do get in are not going to experience a campus that was a safe place for them and a place where they could be nourished and could flourish. And with my letter, I enclosed a check to the trustees of the university in the amount of $1. Why am I telling you this? With the largest outbreak of anti-Semitism on our college campuses, you too can speak up. It makes a difference. We probably have as many as 50 different colleges represented by alumni in this sanctuary, maybe more. If you don't think your school is doing enough to combat anti-Semitism, speak up. Write your own letter to your university president. We cannot be silent and expect change. So please speak up, and I'm happy to share my letter with anyone that wants to use it for ideas. The second eye-opening part that Jacob teaches us is that while it's necessary to make careful preparations, but we also need to know who our friends are and who they are not. Jacob carefully prepared for battle, but recognized that his brother Esau, whose descendants are thought to be the later Roman and European anti-Semites, was not his friend and decided to go his own way. It is important to both make careful preparation for our safety and to reach out to the greater community to find friends. The men's club does both, as they patrol our grounds with the Shomrim on Halloween Eve, and smartly moved our sukkah this year to a more remote location. They also reach out to the greater community through events like Comedy Night that is now coming up. Rabbi Cohen serves as the head of the Interfaith Clergy Council in Livingston. This outreach is all very important. But we also need to know who our friends are not. New York Times columnist Bret Stephens said in a recent column that on October 8th, Jews woke up to discover who our friends were not. I have my own list. Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, who chants the slogan, "From the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free," a slogan calling for the destruction of the state of Israel and all Jews in it, and who has wrongfully accused Israel of genocide. Not a friend. The House of Representatives who censured her for these hateful comments, and particularly the 22 brave Democrats who bucked their own party to support the censure resolution, including our own Josh Gottheimer, the only Jewish congressman from the New Jersey delegation, and New York Democratic Representatives Dan Goldman and Richie Torres, friends. Elon Musk, who supported the anti-Semitic trope that Jews hate white people, saying that was exactly right. Not a friend. And he is not a friend, notwithstanding his recent trip to Israel in an attempt to bail himself out. Those advertisers like Apple, Disney, IBM, and Paramount, who withdrew all their ads from his site X, friends, and that withdrawal may cost Musk $75 million. Those sick people who tear down posters of innocent children and others taken hostage by Hamas, who have no moral decency. Not friends. Who brought these people up to lack all humanity? Who are their parents? The 12 largest law firms who jointly wrote a letter to the leading universities from which they recruit, saying they need to do more to combat anti-Semitism and to protect Jews on campus. Friends. It's interesting to see where we've become, because 50 years ago, that list included many of the so-called white shoe law firms who probably would not have hired me then because of who I was. The list goes on. Those who call for a permanent ceasefire by Israel without calling for the release of all hostages and for Hamas to give up their arms and renounce their repeated calls to murder Jews again and again. Not friends. Nor are those in the media who think there are two sides to every issue. There are not two sides to what is right and what is wrong. The bottom line is recent events have taught us that it's important to make careful preparations to protect ourselves, to reach out to enlist more friends. But we must be clear-eyed in who are not our friends, and to not forget that. Finally, the last lesson we've learned from today's parashah is that Jacob goes off as Israel and forms a nation that he has fathered, and he becomes a great nation. When the media focuses, once again, as we saw this morning, again on the suffering in Gaza, ignoring the acts of Hamas that have caused that suffering, blaming Israel, and when outbreaks of anti-Semitism continue, which we may personally experience, we once again feel alone. As Senator Schumer said this week, quote, "The long arc of history has taught Jews a painful lesson, ultimately that we are alone," end quote. Some say that recent events have not created anti-Semitism, but merely allowed it once again to surface. And there are many parallels now to the position of Jews in Germany in the early 1930s. In fact, one candidate for president even used the Nazi rhetoric of calling his enemies vermin, as Hitler called the Jews. But there is at least one critical difference from the 1930s that can give us hope today. We have a strong and vibrant state of Israel, a nation God promised to Israel, his forefathers, and all their descendants. By continuing to support Israel, we support ourselves, here and everywhere. So we must continue to support Israel, to speak out against anti-Semitism, and most important, remain strong as a Jewish community. So, Shabbat Shalom and Am Yisrael Chai.
Yasher Koach and Kol HaKavod to Jeffrey on his powerful and important words, and especially for that letter that he wrote to the University of Pennsylvania where he told them that he was pulling his funding. And I've mentioned this on the Bima before, but when there's a crisis in Israel or in the Jewish world, as there is at this moment, giving to synagogues and Jewish institutions in America historically goes down because people are giving much more to Israel, as they should be. So I'm asking you if you did something similar to Jeffrey, or if you're planning on doing that, if you're planning on pulling your funding from your alma mater because you feel that they are not supportive of us at this moment, give it to TBS. In all seriousness, we need spaces where Jews feel safe and where we can gather as a community at this moment more than ever. So if that's something you're planning on doing and you're thinking about how to reappropriate those funds, keep TBS or any Jewish institution in the United States in mind, because we need support now too. It's a very strange time for the Jewish world in every sense. Okay, enough of that. We are now going to hear from a second speaker. Oh, and just one more quick thing. Jeffrey mentioned Congressman Josh Gottheimer. He will be joining us here on this Bima next month. We have not formally announced that yet. We're just working out the date, but Congressman Gottheimer will be here. As soon as we finalize the date, I'll let you know. That's why we haven't announced it yet, but I'm very excited. I will be engaging in a conversation with him on the Bima, so it should be an important and wonderful event. Please be sure to make it when that's officially announced. Okay, Ad Khan, as they say.